She had the tow strap on my trailer before I reached the dock. I stood at the edge of the marina parking lot and watched. 3 of them. Karen HO, a board president, self-appointed authority over 96 homes, and apparently now the entire waterfront, was directing 2 men toward my slip. A contracted tow truck sat backed up to my boat's trailer, engine idling, strap going on. She saw me watching, didn't slow down. She walked over with the clipboard she carried everywhere, thick stack of papers, laminated cover sheet, the kind of prop designed to communicate power to people who won't look too closely, and held 1 page out to me.
This slip is HOA common property,
she said.
That vessel is in violation of Section 14. We've given you 30 days of notices. The board voted. We're removing it today.
She said it the way someone talks to a person who has no options left. One of the men behind her polo shirt, HOA logo, embroidered on the chest. No badge, no legal authority beyond what Karen had invented for him, stepped toward me and raised his hand. Step away from the slip. You're interfering with HOA operations. I looked at his hand. I looked at him. I stepped back. That was what she wanted to see, and I let her see it. She didn't know that stepping back was the most dangerous thing I'd done to her all morning. Karen turned back toward the dock, but she spoke louder now, angling herself toward the small group of neighbors gathering along the parking lot path. Dog walkers, a man just leaving for work, a couple standing still at the edge of the grass. We own this waterfront access, she said. Always have. If you had read your CC&Rs, you would have known this day was coming. She reached out and tapped the hull of my boat with her clipboard. The stern faced us. The registration number was right there. 2 letters, 6 digits. Permanent and state registered. I didn't say a word. The marina sits at the bottom of our subdivision. 96 homes built around a private waterfront slips, sold individually with each lot as deeded property. County recorded. My purchase contract 4 years ago had the slip deed on page 3 parcel number in black ink. The slip was mine the moment I signed. Karen had been insisting otherwise for 2 years. It started with notices, aesthetic violations, improper mooring, an unauthorized dock modification, because I replaced a rotting cleat. Small things, the kind of things most people pay and move on from because fighting costs more than folding. A lot of people in this subdivision had folded. Mrs. Pellegrino, 74 years old, fixed income, had paid Karen's fines every month for 7 months, over a wind chime. Dale had lost his truck to a tow Karen ordered without a proper board vote. A young couple down the street, Jess and Marcus, had nearly had a lien placed on their home over a flower pot that was half a shade outside the approved color palette. I'd watched all of it. I'd been collecting all of it. Then, 2 years ago, Karen had the board pass a resolution claiming the entire marina frontage had been reclassified as HOA common area. 3 members voted yes at a 7 a.m. emergency meeting, 48 hours notice, not the required 10 days, not a quorum for a bylaw amendment, and directly contradicting the recorded plat maps on file at the county. She called it a reclassification. My attorney called it legally void. I called it exactly what I needed her to do, because I hadn't sent that legal opinion to Karen. I'd filed it, and I'd waited. Mrs. Pellegrino appeared at the far end of the dock path, now moving faster when she saw the truck. I caught her eye across the distance and gave her the smallest shake of my head. She stopped, looked at me for a moment, stepped back onto the grass. She trusted me. I needed Karen to finish what she was starting. The compliance officer had the strap secured under the trailer frame. He gave Karen a thumbs up. The tow truck driver reached for the winch control. Karen made a note on her clipboard. She looked satisfied. The registration number on the boat's stern caught the morning light. I'd looked at that number 100 times. So had my attorney. So had the detective I'd first called 6 days ago and told it's almost time. If Karen had spent 30 seconds at the county recorder's website the morning she sent that first removal notice, she would have found the slip deed. She would have seen my name on it. She would have driven home and never come back. But she had run this HOA for 8 years on the assumption that paper that looked official was the same as paper that was legally valid, and that if you moved fast and spoke with enough authority, nobody would ever check the difference. She was about to find out how wrong she was. Both cameras had been running since 6 in the morning, one on the dock post where she could see it. I wanted her to keep going anyway. One under the dock housing covering the trailer hitch from below, capturing every frame of what she was doing from an angle she would never think to look for. The harbor master was in his office window. We had spoken 2 days earlier. He knew exactly what was coming, and my phone was already in my hand. She had no idea that every move she made in the next 4 minutes was already being recorded, time-stamped, and forwarded to a detective who had been waiting on my call for 6 days. To understand what happened at the marina that morning, you need to understand what Karen had built over 8 years, and how long people had been letting her get away with it. The subdivision sits about 20 minutes outside the city. 96 homes, quiet streets, well-kept lawns, and a private marina at the bottom of the hill, where the neighborhood slopes toward the water. When the development was originally built, the marina slips were sold as private property, individually deeded, attached to specific lots, recorded at the county, right there in black ink on every purchase contract. If you bought the house, you owned the slip. It was yours. Simple. Karen didn't see it that way. She had been HOA board president for 8 years when I moved in. Before that, by most accounts, the HOA had functioned the way most HOAs are supposed to. Monthly dues, occasional notices about property maintenance, nothing that kept you up at night. Then Karen ran for the board, then ran for president, and within 2 years the culture of the entire subdivision had shifted. The fines started small, grass an inch too long, trash cans visible from the street for more than 4 hours on collection day, a holiday decoration left up 6 days past the approved removal window. Most people paid without question because the fines were modest, and the implied threat behind them that Karen could escalate, that Karen knew the rules better than anyone, that Karen had time and you didn't, made resistance feel more expensive than compliance. That calculation was correct. For a while. Then the fines got less small. Mrs. Pellegrino lives 3 houses down from me. She's 74, retired, fixed income, the kind of neighbor who waves every morning and brings you vegetables from her garden when she has more than she can use. She had a wind chime on her back porch, a small one, the kind you'd see in any garden store. Karen sent her a notice claiming it violated the HOA's Noise Ordinance Section 9, subsection C, persistent mechanical or tonal disturbance audible from adjacent property lines. Mrs. Pellegrino asked Karen which neighbor had complained. Karen said that information was confidential. For 7 months, Karen fined her $150 a month. Mrs. Pellegrino paid every single one because she was afraid. Not afraid of the fine itself, afraid that if she pushed back, Karen would find something bigger to come after her with. A lien, a lawsuit threat. Something that could touch her house. She told me later, "I didn't think anyone would believe me if I said anything. I thought it was just me." It wasn't just her. Dale lives at the end of the cul-de-sac. He's a contractor, early 50s truck, parked in his own driveway, the way every contractor parks their truck backed in close to the garage. One morning he came outside and his truck was gone. Karen had contracted a towing company and listed his driveway, his private deeded driveway, as an HOA common area access lane on the authorization form. The tow cost Dale $340 and a missed workday to retrieve the truck. When he called the towing company, they told him the HOA had provided written authorization. That authorization had one signature on it, Karen's. Not the board's, just Karen, acting alone on a document that gave her authority she didn't legally have to remove a vehicle from private property. Dale kept the authorization. Then there was Jess and Marcus. Young couple bought their house 2 years before I moved in. They planted a flower pot on their front step, ceramic, red, orange, the kind of thing that looks cheerful on a front step. Karen sent them a violation notice. The pot's color didn't match the approved palette. The fine was $75 per week until the pot was removed. When Marcus wrote back asking for the specific palette reference in the CC and Rs, Karen told them the palette was on file at the HOA office and invited them to schedule an appointment to review it during office hours, which she held 1 hour per week. Jess and Marcus hired an attorney. Karen responded by threatening a foreclosure lien for accumulated fines. The attorney got the lien threat dropped. That cost them $1,800. And then there were the Garcias. They don't live in the subdivision anymore. They left the year before I arrived. But their story traveled the way bad stories always travel in small communities, retold in driveways and across back fences, a warning more than anything else. Karen had done the same thing to their boat that she was now doing to mine. Claimed the slip was common property, sent notices, escalated to fines, threatened a lien. The Garcias didn't have an attorney on file. They didn't have receipts ready. They didn't know what Karen was attempting was legally void. They just knew the pressure was relentless and the cost of fighting kept climbing. They signed the trailer over. They moved. That story was in the back of my mind every time I received one of Karen's notices. I moved into the subdivision 4 years ago. The slip deed was on page 3 of my purchase contract. Parcel number, recorded date, my name. Within 6 months, Karen had sent me her first notice. The boat was too large for visual harmony guidelines. Then came the notice about the cleat I replaced. Then the letter about my dockline configuration. Petty things, methodical things, the kind of paper trail Karen built before she moved in for the kill. Year 3, she made her move. An emergency board meeting, 48 hours notice, 7 a.m. 3 of 5 board members showed up. They passed a resolution declaring the entire marina frontage, all the slips, the dock, the waterfront access, reclassified as HOA common area, citing a creative reinterpretation of the CC and Rs. I was at that meeting. I sat in the back row, said nothing, and took photographs of the sign-in sheet. That week I called a real estate attorney. She pulled the recorded plat, cross-referenced it against the CC and Rs, and reviewed the board's resolution in detail. The verdict was 3 sentences long. The reclassification was procedurally void, legally unenforceable, and directly contradicted the recorded plat maps on file at the county. The slip was mine. It had always been mine. I did not send that opinion to Karen. I filed it in a folder on my kitchen counter and waited. Karen had run this HOA like a small country for 8 years. The problem with small countries is that the people running them tend to forget that real law exists just outside the border. I was not the Garcias, and I had been waiting for Karen to do exactly what she was doing now. 3 weeks before the morning with the tow truck, Karen came to my door. Not certified mail, not an email through the HOA portal. She came herself, which she had never done before in 4 years. She brought one of the board members, a man named Harris, and she carried a document in a manila envelope with the HOA's letterhead printed on the front in navy blue. I saw them coming up the driveway from the kitchen window. I went to the door. Karen held out the envelope before I'd finished opening the screen. "We've been more than patient," she said. "This is your formal 30-day removal notice. The vessel must be removed from the slip by the deadline listed on page 1. If you don't comply voluntarily, the board is authorized to arrange removal at your expense." She paused. "There's also a fine summary attached. Accumulated balance is $4,200. She said $4,200 the way someone says a number they expect to physically hurt you. I took the envelope. I opened it there on the doorstep slowly and read the first page while she waited. 30 days. Removal at owner's expense if non-compliant. Fines payable within 15 days regardless of vessel status. Section 14 cited 4 separate times. I looked up. "Is this the final notice?" I asked. "Meaning no more letters after this. This is the last step before you act." Karen said yes. This was the final notice. And the board voted on this unanimously. All 5 members. She straightened slightly. "The vote was unanimous," she said. "Yes." I nodded. "Thank you for bringing this personally." She blinked. That was not the response she had prepared for. Harris, standing a half step behind her, looked at the ground. Karen waited a moment, maybe expecting me to say something else, to argue, to threaten, to ask for an extension, to do anything that looked like a person scrambling. When I didn't, she clicked her pen, made a note, and turned and walked back down the driveway with Harris behind her. I watched them go. Then I went inside and called my attorney. She picked up on the second ring. I told her Karen had delivered the final notice in person, stated it was the last step, and confirmed the board had voted unanimously. I read her the key language from page 1. My attorney was quiet for a moment. Then, if she physically removes that boat without a court order, that's theft by conversion under state law, premeditated, given this notice chain. Another pause. "You could send her a cease and desist right now and this stops today." "I know," I said. "But you're not going to do that." "Not yet." She understood. We'd had a version of this conversation before. If Karen stopped now, what I had was a paper dispute, a legal argument about a reclassification vote that never should have happened. Winnable probably, but slow, expensive, and invisible. No consequences for Mrs. Pellegrino's 7 months of fines. No consequences for Dale's truck. No consequences for the Garcias. Karen would simply retreat, regroup, and find a different angle. But if Karen acted on the notice, if she physically moved that boat, then I didn't have a paper dispute anymore. I had a crime, with a paper trail that began at her front door. What I needed was for her to do what she had always done: keep going. After I hung up, I made a second call. A detective I had met through a neighborhood watch meeting 2 years earlier. Not a close friend, but someone I'd spoken with enough times to have his direct number. I explained the situation from the beginning: the slip deed, the reclassification vote and its procedural failures, the 4-year notice campaign, the $4,200 fine, the 30-day deadline. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "If she puts hands on that boat without a court order and you've got clean ownership documentation, we're looking at theft by conversion. That's a real charge, not a civil matter." We worked out a protocol. I would text him a single word when Karen arrived at the marina and made a move. He would have a unit standing by. No advance presence, nothing visible that might cause Karen to abort. Just the text, and they'd roll. The day after that call, I drove to the marina with 2 camera housings and a power drill. The first camera went on the dock post at the entrance to my slip. Visible, obvious, a deterrent anyone would notice. Not because I thought it would stop Karen, because I wanted it on record that I had one. The second camera took me 40 minutes to mount. It went under the dock inside a waterproof housing positioned to cover the trailer hitch and the area where a tow strap would be attached. Low, unobtrusive, pointing up and out. I tested both feeds on my phone. Clear, time-stamped, automatically uploading to a secured cloud server I'd set up the week before. Then I walked down to the harbor master's office at the end of the dock. He'd been there 11 years. He knew every slip, every registered vessel, every owner. I told him what was coming. I showed him the removal notice. He pulled his own records, the marina's internal slip registry, which listed every slip by parcel number and owner, updated every time a property changed hands. My name had been on that registry since the day I closed on the house. He agreed to be available if law enforcement needed confirmation from the marina's records. Then I went home. Over the following 3 weeks, I did not respond to Karen's notice. Not by email, not by phone, not through my attorney. I paid none of the $4,200. I made no move to remove the boat. The deadline came and went. I knew what Karen would read into the silence. She'd seen it before she'd seen the Garcias go quiet the same way, right before they folded. She'd seen other homeowners stop responding when the pressure got heavy enough. In her experience, silence meant surrender was coming. She had never dealt with someone who was quiet because they were ready. I signed for the notice, smiled, and went inside to make a phone call. Not to a lawyer, to a detective. The week after Karen's visit, I cleared the kitchen table. I'm not a naturally tidy person, but there is a particular kind of focus that comes when you know a confrontation is coming, and you understand that the only thing standing between you and the outcome you need is the quality of your preparation. I spread everything out. 18 months of folders, printed emails, certified mail receipts, photographs, handwritten notes with dates and times in the margins. I had 2 categories. Category A was mine. The boat case. Slip deed certified copy from the county recorder's office, my name, my parcel number stamped and dated. Boat title, state registration. My attorney's written analysis of the 3 procedural failures in Karen's reclassification vote. Every notice Karen had sent me in chronological order, starting with the aesthetic violation from month 6 of living here, and ending with the $4,200 summary she'd handed me on the doorstep. Each one in its own plastic sleeve, each sleeve labeled by date. The slip deed sat on top of everything. It was 2 pages, not complicated, not dense with legal language, just a recorded document from the county saying this parcel of land, including the marina slip designated by this number, belongs to this person. My name, my address. Filed the week I closed on the house. Sitting in a county database the entire time Karen had been sending me notices, the entire time she had been insisting the slip was HOA property, available to anyone who wanted to look it up for the cost of a $12 records request. She had never looked it up. Category B was everyone else, the pattern file. And to build it properly, I needed to sit down with the people who had lived it. I went to Mrs. Pellegrino first. She opened the door before I'd finished knocking. She'd seen me coming up the path. She had coffee, already made, 2 cups, like she'd been expecting this conversation for a long time. and had been waiting for someone to start it. I asked her to walk me through the wind chime situation from the beginning. She did. All of it, the first notice, her attempt to call Karen and ask which neighbor had complained. Karen's response that the information was confidential. The 7 months of $150 fines. The morning she sat at her kitchen table with a calculator and realized she'd paid over $1,000 for a wind chime she'd owned for 12 years. I asked if she still had the notices. She got up and came back with a shoebox. Every notice, every receipt, every piece of correspondence, organized by date, rubber-banded in groups. She had kept all of it because she told me she had the feeling that someday it would matter. She just didn't know who to give it to. I asked her if she'd be willing to write a short statement, what happened in her own words, what Karen said to her directly. She picked up the pen before I finished asking. When she wrote down the exact words Karen had used, the CC and R's exist for a reason, and if you're too old to read them, I'll read them for you. Her hand was steady. She had been carrying that sentence for a long time. She signed it without hesitating. Then she looked up and said, "I thought it was just me. I really did." I told her it wasn't. Not even close. Dale met me in his driveway that afternoon. He had the documents in his truck already. He'd pulled them out of the glove compartment when I called, like he'd been carrying them around, waiting for this exact moment. The towing company invoice, the HOA's written authorization form, his own photos from the morning he came outside and found his driveway empty. The authorization form was the critical piece. A proper HOA enforcement action requires a board vote, a resolution, at minimum documented approval from more than one person. This form had one signature, Karen's name. Karen's handwriting dated, no board member listed as co-authorizing, no resolution number referenced. She had contracted a private towing company and authorized them to remove a vehicle from private property using a form she had signed herself, as if her signature alone was sufficient. That form was going to matter. I photographed everything Dale had and told him what I was building. His response was exactly 3 words: whatever you need. Jess and Marcus were next. They spread their paperwork across their dining room table. The original violation notice for the flower pot, Karen's escalation letters, the lien thread, the correspondence from their attorney, the final letter confirming the lien had been dropped. Total out of pocket, $1,800 in legal fees for a flower pot. Marcus had calculated the hourly rate of the whole situation once as a dark joke. He didn't find it funny anymore. They both signed statements. Jess pulled out her phone and showed me the photographs she had taken throughout the process. Every notice posted on her door, the lien paperwork, the attorney's letters. 31 photographs, dated and geotagged. I also got a brief phone statement from the Garcias. They live 2 counties away now. She answered on the first ring. I explained what was happening with the boat. There was a long pause, and then she said, "We thought about fighting it. We just didn't know how." I told her that was what I was trying to fix. Back at my kitchen table that evening, I divided everything into 2 complete files. Category A, the boat case went into a new manila envelope. Clean copy of the slip deed on top, attorney analysis behind it. Karen's notice chain after that. I made a second copy of this file for the detective, and a third for the marina office. Category B, the pattern file went into its own binder. Neighbor statements, Dale's authorization form, Jess's photographs, the Garcia phone summary, the HOA meeting minutes from the reclassification vote, with the attendance sheet showing only 3 of 5 board members present. The binder was not for winning the criminal case. The slip deed would win the criminal case. The binder was for showing the DA that this was not a mistake, that it was a method. I put both files on the counter next to my keys. I tested the cameras one more time. The feeds were clean. The cloud upload was running. I was ready. Now I needed Karen to move. 2 days before the removal deadline expired, Karen called an emergency board meeting. The notice went out at 9:17 p.m. A mass email to all 96 homeowners announcing a meeting the following morning at 7 a.m. Not the required 10 days notice, not even 24 hours, 9 hours. I was already in bed when my phone lit up. Jess's name on the screen. The text said, "Did you see the email? 7 a.m. tomorrow. I think this is about your boat." I lay there for a moment in the dark. Then I got up, made coffee, and read the agenda. One item listed: Enforcement Resolution Marina Slip Non-Compliance. No further description. No supporting documents attached. I set my alarm for 6. The meeting was held in the HOA's community room, a beige rectangle with folding chairs and a wall-mounted screen that Karen used for her PowerPoint presentations. I arrived at 6:52. About 30 homeowners were there, which was more than usual for a 7 a.m. session, which told me word had traveled overnight. Jess and Marcus were in the third row. Dale was near the back wall with his arms crossed. Mrs. Pellegrino had taken a seat near the door. Karen was already at the front, laptop open, expression arranged into the particular look she used for official business, serious, unhurried. The look of someone performing competence for an audience. She called the meeting to order at 7:03. This session addresses a single enforcement matter, she said. One homeowner has been in documented non-compliance with the board's marina reclassification policy for over 2 years. He has received multiple notices, a final removal order, and has not responded. The board needs to authorize the next step. She pulled up a document on the screen. A resolution, pre-written, formatted with the HOA letterhead, already numbered and dated. It authorized the board to arrange removal of any non-compliant vessel from HOA common area marina property using contracted services at the non-compliant owner's expense without further notice. She read it aloud once. Then she looked up. Discussion. I raised my hand. Karen looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded with the particular patience of someone who already knows what they're going to say to whatever comes next. I stood. 2 questions, I said. First, has the board obtained a court order authorizing the physical removal of private personal property? Karen said they did not need one. The CC&Rs authorized this enforcement action. Second, has any board member personally reviewed the recorded plat maps and the individual slip deed on file at the county recorder's office? Karen's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. She let half a second pass. Then she said, "That question is outside the scope of this meeting's agenda." She looked down at her notes. "We'll proceed to the vote. With respect, the chair rules that question out of order." She said it without looking up. I sat down. The vote was called. 3 members, Karen and the 2 longest-serving board members, raised their hands in favor. 2 members voted no. One of them was a woman named Torres, who had joined the board 18 months ago. The other was a man named Rodriguez, who had been on the board for 3 years. Rodriguez voted no without hesitation and without explanation. He just raised his hand firmly on the no and left it there until Karen logged it. Resolution passed 3-2. Karen closed her laptop. "The removal will be scheduled before the deadline," she said. "This meeting is adjourned." People filed out. I stayed in my chair for a moment, watching the room clear. Rodriguez was the last board member to gather his things. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way someone moves when they're choosing to still be in a room. When Karen and the other board members had gone, he walked toward the door, past my row, and stopped. He didn't sit down. He stood beside the folding chairs and kept his voice low. "I voted no because I think what she's doing is legally wrong," he said. "I've said it in closed session twice. She overrules it." He paused. "I can't do more than that right now, but I want you to know I voted no." I looked at him. "I know," I said. "I saw." He nodded, once picked up his folder, and walked out. I sat there another minute. 36 hours until the deadline. In the parking lot, I called the detective. I told him the resolution had passed. I read him the key language, without further notice, contracted services, at the non-compliant owner's expense. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "That's premeditated intent in writing, on HOA letterhead signed by the board president. If she moves that boat, I can work with this." We confirmed the protocol. 1 text, 1 word. He had a unit on standby. I drove to the marina after the call. I tested both cameras. Dock post clear. Underdock housing clear. Both feeds uploading to the cloud server, in real-time timestamps running. I walked the dock once, checked the harbor master's office hours on the posted sign, confirmed he'd be there by 8 a.m. Then I went home and placed the manila folder on the kitchen counter. Slip deed on top, exactly where I could grab it in 30 seconds. I stood there for a moment looking at it. I thought about the Garcias, about the morning she came outside and found the driveway empty, about how she'd said on the phone 2 weeks earlier, "We thought about fighting it, we just didn't know how." The difference between what happened to them and what was about to not happen to me was not luck. It was not cleverness. It was 18 months of a folder on a kitchen counter and a phone number in my contacts, and 2 cameras that had been running since 6 that morning. The resolution passed 3-2. Karen had her authorization, and I had everything I needed. The deadline morning was cold and clear. I was at the marina by 7. The slip was quiet, the water flat, the boat sitting exactly where it always sat, bow facing out, registration number on the stern catching the early light. I checked both camera feeds from my phone. Dock post running, underdock housing running, both uploading to the cloud server, timestamps ticking forward in real time. I put my phone in my jacket pocket. I stood at the edge of the parking lot and waited. Karen arrived at 8:15. Her car pulled in first, then a second vehicle, Harris, one of her board allies. Then the tow truck, which had backed in slowly and positioned itself near the marina entrance, while Karen was still getting out of her car. A fourth man arrived in a separate vehicle, the same compliance officer in the same polo shirt from the morning. She had delivered the removal notice clipboard, already in hand. She was organized. She had come prepared to finish this. Karen walked to the trunk of her car and took out a stack of papers. She separated them into sets and handed one set to Harris. Then she walked toward my slip, and when she saw me standing at the edge of the lot, she changed direction and came toward me instead. She held out a copy of the resolution, the same document that had passed 3-2 2 days earlier, now with a date and a case number printed in the header. "We gave you 30 days, she said. "Every opportunity to comply voluntarily. This is now an HOA enforcement action." She pressed the paper into my hand. "You're welcome to observe from the parking lot. You may not interfere with the operation or approach the slip while removal is in progress." She said it without aggression. She said it the way someone reads from a script they have already memorized and tested and found effective. The tone of someone who had done this before and expected it to go the same way it always went. I took the paper. I didn't say anything. She held my gaze for 1 second, maybe 2, reading my face for the panic or the argument she had been expecting. When she found neither, she gave a small nod, the nod of someone confirming a calculation, and turned back toward the slip without waiting for a response. I watched her walk away. The compliance officer moved to the trailer. He crouched at the hitch, ran the tow strap under the frame, and began threading it through the safety catch. The tow truck driver had positioned the truck's rear bumper about 4 feet from the trailer tongue. He was out of the cab watching the compliance officer work, one hand resting on the winch control. Karen stood on the dock above the slip with her clipboard, watching the operation. Occasionally, she glanced at me across the lot. Every time she looked, I was standing in the same place, not moving, not making calls, not raising my hand or shouting or walking toward the slip. She was reading my stillness as resignation. I was not resigning. I heard footsteps behind me and didn't turn. The neighbors had been arriving in 1s and 2s since 8 o'clock. Word had moved through the subdivision the previous evening, the way bad news always moves by text and whispered conversation across back fences. Mrs. Pellegrino came to stand about 10 feet to my left. She had her hands clasped in front of her knuckles pressed together. Dale stood further back with his arms crossed and his jaw set. Jess was recording on her phone, the screen angled toward the dock. Marcus stood next to her with his hands in his pockets. Nobody spoke. The harbor master came out of his office. He stepped into the doorway of the dock building and stood there watching. He didn't walk toward Karen. He didn't call out. He just stood in that doorway with his hands at his sides, a man in his position who had been at this marina for 11 years and knew every registered vessel and every recorded owner of every slip on the property. Karen saw him. She met his eyes across the dock. She gave him a brief nod, the same kind she'd given me the nod that said, "I have authorization, I have paperwork, this is covered." The harbor master didn't nod back. He just kept watching. She turned back to the compliance officer. "How are we looking?" "Straps secure," he said. He stood up, tested the connection with both hands. "Ready to pull." Karen wrote something on her clipboard. The tow driver got back in the cab. The winch motor started a low mechanical grind that carried across the whole marina parking lot and made several people in the crowd behind me go still. The tow line went taut. The trailer tongue lifted slightly and began to slide. My boat moved. 6 inches, 8 inches. The trailer rolled forward on its wheels as the winch took up the slack, and for the first time in 4 years of notices and threats and fines and resolutions and meetings, the thing Karen had been claiming to own was actually moving in the direction she had always said it would go. She allowed herself a moment. I saw it happen. She was watching the trailer move, and something in her face shifted. The controlled official expression gave way just briefly to something more personal: satisfaction. The particular satisfaction of a person who has been told repeatedly that something can't be done, and is watching it happen anyway. She made a note on her clipboard. Mrs. Pellegrino made a small sound beside me. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at the boat. I looked at Karen. Then I took my phone out of my jacket pocket. I opened my messages, found the detective's name, typed one word, sent it. She had the strap on the trailer. She was smiling, and my phone was already in my hand. 4 minutes after I sent the text, 2 patrol vehicles pulled into the marina parking lot. No lights, no sirens, just 2 cars moving at a steady, deliberate pace, parking side by side near the lot entrance. The detective got out of the first vehicle. He was in plain clothes, dark jacket, no uniform, and he walked toward the dock with the unhurried stride of someone who already knew exactly what they were walking into. The tow truck winch was still running. Karen heard the cars and turned. She saw the detective coming and immediately moved to intercept him, clipboard raised slightly, the same authoritative posture she had used on me 20 minutes earlier. She reached him before he reached the slip. "Officer, good morning," she said. "We have an active HOA enforcement action in progress. We have board authorization." "Ma'am," he said at once quietly, "I need you to step back from the vehicle." Something in his tone stopped her mid-sentence. Behind her, the compliance officer had already read the room. He didn't wait for instruction. He walked to the trailer, crouched down, and began unthreading the tow strap from the hitch. The tow driver had cut the winch. The parking lot went quiet. Karen turned to look at them, then back at the detective. The clipboard dropped an inch. The detective walked past her toward me. I handed him the manila folder. He opened it to the first page, the county recorder's certified copy of the slip deed, and read it for approximately 10 seconds. Then he turned and held it up so Karen could see it clearly from where she was standing. "This slip is deeded private property," he said. "The vessel on this slip is registered to the same owner." He looked at her directly. "Do you have a court order authorizing removal of this property?" Karen straightened. "We don't need a court order. Our CC&Rs authorize this enforcement action. The board reclassified this marina as common area. A board resolution is not a court order." He said it without raising his voice, without impatience, the way someone states a fact that has always been true and will continue to be true, regardless of what anyone in this parking lot believes. It is not a legal instrument that authorizes the seizure of private personal property. Karen's jaw tightened. In HOA jurisdictions, the CC&Rs function as a governing document that supersedes. CC&Rs cannot override recorded property deeds or state theft statutes. He closed the folder. They never could. The words landed like something physical. I watched Karen's face in the silence that followed. The official expression, the controlled, competent, authoritative mask she had worn for 8 years, didn't fall all at once. It cracked. Small fractures at the edges first. She looked at Harris, who was standing 6 feet behind her, holding his stack of resolution copies and staring at the asphalt. The detective's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then held it up toward Karen. "This is the homeowner's attorney. She'd like to put something on the record." He put it on speaker. My attorney's voice was clear and unhurried in the open air of the parking lot. She identified herself and stated 3 things, one after another, in plain sentences. The reclassification vote had been noticed, with 48 hours instead of the required 10 days. Only 3 of 5 board members were present, not a valid quorum for a bylaw amendment, and the reclassification directly contradicted the recorded plat maps on file with the county, which had never been amended. The slip had never legally been anything other than private property. "Any one of those 3 failures voids the resolution independently," she said. "Together, they make the reclassification legally null from the day it was passed." Karen said, "That's a matter of legal interpretation." "No," my attorney said. "It's a matter of public record. The plat maps are available to anyone with a county recorder account and $12. The detective ended the call. From the doorway of the harbor master's office, footsteps. He walked over without being summoned, carrying a laminated binder, the marina's internal slip registry. He opened it to a tabbed page and handed it to the detective. 11 years of ownership records organized by parcel number. My name. My slip. Listed from the day I closed. This slip has never appeared in any marina common area record, the harbor master said. Not once. The detective made a note. Then Rodriguez spoke. He had been standing at the back edge of the crowd since Karen's team arrived, still holding his board member folder. And now he walked forward and stopped beside the detective. He stated his name, his role, his tenure on the board. "I voted no on the removal resolution 2 days ago," he said. because I believed, and still believe, that the board had no legal authority to authorize removal of private property without a court order. I said so in the meeting. It's in the minutes. Harris behind Karen looked up for the first time. Then he looked back down. Karen was very still. The detective turned to her. Based on the documentation on scene, recorded ownership, pre-existing notice chain board resolution authorizing physical action, without judicial order, and active removal in progress, I'm opening a theft by conversion report. You and the other voting board members will be contacted by the DA's office. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a single document. This is your notification. He held it out. Karen took it with both hands. Her fingers were shaking. The crowd behind me exhaled. Mrs. Pellegrino made a small sound, not quite a word, and pressed her hand over her mouth. I glanced over. Her eyes were wet. She wasn't looking at Karen. She was looking at me, and then she looked away, at the water, and her shoulders dropped about 2 inches, the way shoulders drop when something that has been held for a very long time is finally allowed to release. Dale said one word. He said it quietly, to no one in particular. Finally. Jess was still recording. Marcus had both hands out of his pockets now, and he and 3 other neighbors were already talking quietly among themselves, the kind of rapid, low-voiced conversation that happens when people who have been isolated by the same fear suddenly discover they were never alone in it. The compliance officer had finished coiling his strap. He carried it back to his vehicle without making eye contact with anyone. The tow truck driver was already pulling forward toward the lot exit. Harris walked to his car. No resolution copies in his hand anymore. He had set them on a parking lot barrier at some point during the last 10 minutes. They sat there in a neat stack, navy blue letterhead facing up. Nobody's problem anymore. Karen walked to her car. She did not speak. She did not look at me. She did not look at the dock, or the slip, or the boat that had traveled 8 inches in one direction and was now sitting exactly where it had always sat. She got in, started the engine, and drove out of the lot at the same careful, measured speed she had arrived at. Her clipboard was still on the dock. The boat never actually left. I think about that sometimes. Through 4 years of notices and fines and threats and resolutions, and 1 emergency board meeting at 7 in the morning, through 2 years of Karen insisting the slip belonged to the HOA, through the 30-day deadline and the tow truck and the strap and the 8 inches of trailer movement, the boat never left. It was sitting in that slip the morning after, and the morning after that, and it is sitting there now. That detail matters more to me than most of what followed. But here's what followed. The DA's office contacted Karen 3 days after the marina. Theft by conversion, the charge the detective had named on scene, was formally filed against her personally, not against the HOA as an entity. Against Karen by name for authorizing and directing the physical seizure of private personal property without judicial order, with documented premeditated intent in the form of the board resolution she had signed herself. Her personal legal fees began the day she hired a defense attorney. I don't know the exact number. I didn't need to. The county recorder's office issued a written determination within 2 weeks based on a request filed by my attorney and cross-referenced against the 3 procedural failures in the reclassification vote. The determination was 4 paragraphs. The operative sentence was in the 2nd paragraph. The HOA's marina reclassification resolution was void ab initio, void from the beginning, as if it had never been passed. The recorded plat maps remained unchanged. Every slip in that marina was what it had always been, private, deeded property. A court order followed, requiring the HOA to formally expunge all fines levied under the fraudulent reclassification. That meant Mrs. Pellegrino's $1,050. It meant the accumulated balance on my own account, the $4,200 Karen had delivered in a navy blue envelope on my doorstep. It meant every notice, every fee, every fine that had been issued using the reclassification as its legal basis, going back to the date of the original vote. The HOA's liability insurance carrier was notified. I was told by my attorney that the carrier's response was swift and unhappy. The HOA's premiums increased. The board faced a special assessment, a charge distributed across all 96 homeowners to cover the liability gap that they were required to explain at the next general meeting. Dale received a reimbursement check for $340 from the HOA's liability carrier. He told me he framed the envelope. I called the Garcias the week after the county determination came through. I explained what had happened: the void reclassification, the criminal filing, the court order on fines. There was a long pause on the line. She said, "Does that mean what happened to us was wrong too?" I told her yes, that it had always been wrong, that the slip deed the HOA had pressured them into surrendering had been their legal property, and what Karen had done to them was the same thing she had tried to do to me. Getting their situation remedied fully was not simple. The property transfer had involved signed documents. It would require separate legal action. I connected them with my attorney. The outcome of that process was uncertain when I last spoke with them, and I won't pretend otherwise. Some things Karen broke can't be fixed as cleanly as a fine on a ledger. That stays with me. Karen submitted her resignation from the board 12 days after the marina. It came in a one-paragraph letter addressed to the remaining board members, citing personal reasons, no further comment. Rodriguez read it aloud at the next general HOA meeting. 71 of the 96 homeowners attended that meeting. I had never seen more than 20 at any prior session. People sat in folding chairs and stood along the back wall and spilled out into the hallway. Rodriguez had been elected interim president by the remaining board members the week prior. He called the meeting to order and read Karen's resignation letter, and then looked up at the room and said, "I want to begin by acknowledging that a number of people in this community have been treated unjustly under the previous board's leadership. That is the first thing on the agenda." The room was very quiet. Not the tight, held breath quiet of people afraid to speak the other kind. The kind that happens when people who have been isolated for a long time are given permission to exhale. Mrs. Pellegrino was in the third row. She had her wind chime in her lap. She'd brought it to the meeting, which I thought was either eccentric or exactly right, and I decided it was exactly right. She didn't say anything during the meeting. She just sat there with it. About a month after all of it, I went down to the marina on a weekday afternoon when the lot was empty. I sat on the boat for a while. The water was still. The slip looked the same as it always had. Same dock, same post, same view out toward the open water. The slip number was on the post. The same number Karen had cited in her removal notice. The same number on the county deed. The two things that had been pointing at each other the entire time she was insisting they said different things. Mrs. Pellegrino came by on the waterfront path. She had the wind chime with her rehung now back on her porch, but she'd taken it down for a walk apparently. She waved. I waved back. The camera housing was still on the dock post. I hadn't taken it down. The camera inside it wasn't recording anymore. There was nothing left to record, but I had left the housing up because I liked what it meant. Not as a warning, not as a monument to what happened. Just as a reminder that preparation is quiet, and patience is a form of power. And the right moment to act is rarely the first moment someone gives you reason to. I kept the camera up, just in case.